Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar provided by ENSULIB, IFLA's Environment, Sustainability, and Libraries Section. Today's webinar is the environmental impact of a book, Understanding for Action. It's an interesting topic. A book can represent information, ideas, stories, and knowledge. As a physical object, how is its multi-stage life cycle with unmeasurable environmental footprints and impact? Any action we could do? Let's take a look in today's webinar. My name is Priscilla Poon. I am the secretary of the ENSULIB section. I serve at the University of Macau Library in Macau, China, as the head of the technical process. Today, co-facilitating is Antonia Makata, who is the chair of ENSULIB section of IFLA, and also the director of operations and engagement, University of Sydney Library. Hi, Antonia. It's now turned over to you.
Thank you very much, Priscilla, and welcome everybody to our webinar today. I think we have an audience from all over the world, which is wonderful to see, and especially welcome to our esteemed speaker this evening, or it's evening for me, and I know it's morning for some of you, who is Benoît MOREAU, who is from Paris, France. And let me introduce him before I hand over to him for his session. And so the webinar will be presented by Benoît, who is a founder of Ecograf, which is a French-based consultancy specializing in environmental issues for the international graphic arts industry. Benoît has been working on these topics for 25 years. He's carried out one of the first evaluations of the carbon footprint of a book in 2007, and he works at the European level for book and magazine publishers and printers. He holds a master's degree in geosciences from l'Institut Français du Pétrole and in international affairs from the Sorbonne. Welcome, Ben. It's wonderful to have you here, and thank you for agreeing to present. I'll now hand over to you to take us through this fascinating topic area that we'll focus on tonight.
Thank you, Antonia and Priscilla, and thank you for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning for me, this evening for you, this afternoon, I don't know. So let's talk about environmental impact of a book, and just a short presentation of myself, please, next. So as Antonia said, who I am? I'm a French consultant. You can hear with my strong accent. I'm sorry for that. And I'm based in the south of Paris, in France. I'm working for more than 25 years on this topic of environmental issues and graphic industry. And I'm working in France and across all Europe. And I had some project in India too. So it's a worldwide level. I have a particularity. I work for both printed matter purchaser and for printers. For printers, I work mainly today on the carbon footprint evaluation. For this, I use the European tool named ClimateCalc. With this tool, the printers can assess their own emission and can send an evaluation, an assessment of the carbon footprint of a specific order for their clients. And I am one of the founders of Imprimver in France. It's a very strong label, environmental label we use in France, in order to prove that the environmental situation of the workshop is okay. But my other activity is with paper buyers or paper printed matter purchaser, like book and magazine publishers or insurances or production agencies. And for them, I'm working on the GHG reporting, paper policy, and I can build some tool in order to in order to help them to assess their own GHG emissions. So next. Today, what are the goals of this webinar? I would like to show you the main environmental impact of a book production, okay, because this is my specialty, and I'm talking about production, not so much about selling or bookshop or so on. No, my specialty is book production. I would like to understand action taken by to show you action taken by the graphic ecosystem, okay, to reduce impacts, and I think. This is one important word when I'm talking about ecosystem. You know, in French, we used to talk about graphic chain, and graphic chain is an horizontal, vertical point of view. And I prefer to talk about ecosystem because it's more horizontal point of view, and because we are all in an ecosystem: paper manufacturers, editors, printers, library, bookshop, and so on. And I think we love the same products, and we want to defend the same product is a book. And so we are all at the same level. And I would like to highlight what to consider next and the biggest challenge we can see in a near future. Just one point. There's something, okay, this is true, okay, we can say, okay, what is the CO2 emission, okay, it's an evaluation, and even it's in a magnitude order, we can say this is a technical point of view, and I think there's no debate on this. But for other points, I will show you my own experience, okay? My own experience is an experience of a technical person, okay, because I'm an engineer from Europe, okay, and it's not an universal truth, okay. We can debate on this, and we can open the discussion of different points, okay. And this is only a testimony, okay. This is a very, very important. So next, let's start on talking about paper and pulp. Okay, next, please. So the first point about when we're talking about pulp, okay. So we know we are using wood to make paper. It's obvious, but we have to remind it. And when we're talking about harvesting, we're talking about industry. Okay, this is very a big point. You cannot not imagine. Only one person in the forest cutting the tree. No, we're talking about big industry. Okay, and if we can see the next slide, please. Honestly, I don't think, except in some area, specific area in the world, okay, we cannot connect today the paper industry with the deforestation. Okay, it's we have problem, for example, in Europe. This is a photo from Sweden, for example. We have problem when we're talking about clear cutting, for example. This is a problem when you are when you cut more than, for example, 20 hectares of forest. Sorry, I cannot make the conversion in other unity. It's hectare. It's 10,000 square meters. Okay. When you cut more than 20 hectares of the forest, we are talking about clear cutting. Okay, and this can be a problem, but we don't talk about deforestation, because it's a forest. Forest who grown for the paper industry. When you cut it, after that you can replace the trees with the same type, the same nature of trees, and the forest is coming back. Okay, so this is not deforestation, but we still have problem. I think we still have some problem of deforestation. For example, in Indonesia, we should have still problem here, I think. But in other countries, but we are talking about industry. Okay, what is the problem of the wood today? See, can we see the next slide, please? What is the environmental impact? Okay, we have problem of deforestation, but while not fully resolved, it's not seem to be the main impact. But we have a problem of biodiversity. Okay, you know, when you plant only the same species in a forest, you will decrease the numbers of the animal species. Okay, we in France we used to talking about green desert. Okay, it's not a desert because it's a forest, but you don't have a lot of mammals, for example, biodiversity, or insects biodiversity. Just one point. I love paper industry. I love printing industry. Okay, I'm only working on this industry. Okay, but I want to have to tell the truth. Okay, because it's very important for me to know, to identify our problem, to solve it. Okay, and when I'm talking about the problem, I don't want to tell who is a bad guy or who is a good guy. No, I just want to show what we are on, which topics we have to work on. Okay, this is and I think it's very important to tell the truth, and it's very important to tell, okay, to make papers, we cut trees, and this is a reality. Okay, and the problem is not cut the trees, but the problem is how do you cut the trees? How do you manage the forest? This is the problem. Okay, so we can have some problem of biodiversity, as I told you. If I have only one species in my forest, I don't I won't have only one species of animals or insects, but I will decrease the numbers of species. Okay, and we know for forest, if you have only one species, it's not a good situation for your forest if you have big storm, for example, and so on. You have to mix different species on in your forest, but it's a challenge for the wood management. There is another problem. Impact is carbon storage. Okay, we know that the forest store carbon. Okay, but this can decrease with the climate change because we have more fires, we have more disease and pest insects. Okay, and in France, for example, there is new studies to prove that okay, the carbon store of the forest, of the national forest, is decreasing. Okay, and there is a question because okay, we know when if you cut a tree and if you plant another one, okay, you can say, okay, if I use the wood for fire industry or to make energy or to make papers, I will release biogenic carbon in the atmosphere, but it's not a big deal because this carbon is coming from the atmosphere, okay? But it's coming from, I don't know, for 40, 30, 25 years ago, okay? But so if I release it in the atmosphere, it's not a big deal, okay? I capture it, and I release it. But now we know there is a climate emergencies, okay? And there is a question, is it better to keep trees standing in the forest or harvest and replant? This is a big question, okay? Before we say, okay, because we had time to manage climate change, we say, okay, it's not a big deal. We can cut it and replant it. But now we are in an emergency. So the question is standing. So what are the challenges for the wood management, for the wood? There is a big challenge is wood availabilities for the paper industry, okay? So we have less paper due to fires. Okay, in Europe, you can, I don't know if you know, but in the south of Europe, for example, this summer was awful in Portugal and Spain, mainly in Spain. we have disease and pest insects. For example, in the east of France, we are losing our forest due to the pest insects. Okay, and one very important point is competition for uses. Okay, for example, we in Europe we have more and more and more bioenergies, and for bioenergies you are using wood, and generally the wood used for energy is the same wood that pulp manufacturers are using. So there is a competition for use. What are the solutions? Because we need to find some solutions. Okay, there is certification, FSC and PFC, okay, in order to prove that your forest is well managed. And it's honestly, it's good certification, and there's no debate on that. And there is, for example, in Europe, there is a new European regulation named EUDR. Okay, it's in order to prove, because we know, as I told you, there's no big problem of deforestation in Europe, but we know that we still have problem in Africa, in South America. And this new regulation is put in place in order to prove that we don't import product from deforestation. Okay, we're talking about paper, but we're mainly talking about soya, about beef, about chocolate, okay, and okay, paper, but it's still in progress. And we can use, in order to decrease the pressure on the forest, we can use recycled paper, okay, but we know that for the book publisher, it's not always suitable. Okay, if you want a white paper with a good sorry, in French is a good end. You know, when you have a good sheet of paper, okay, recycled paper is not always suitable, but it's a solution. Okay, next, please. So when we talk about paper, okay, there is a point. It's a big industry. Okay, this is, for example, this is a photo. This is a part of the paper mill, and the north part we can see we are talking about the pulp manufacturing. Okay, and you can see on the right the wood stored to produce the pulp. And on the next photos, please. This is the same plants. You can see the paper mill, okay, and the paper machine in white. And you can see on the photos there is a car park, and you can imagine the wife of this company. It's huge, okay. So to make paper, we need it's a very heavy industry, okay. And for example, for these plants, we are talking about the production around 300,000 metric ton per year. Okay, it's huge. Okay, it's so with this industry, when you can see this photo, there is just one point. How can you believe something and someone who are talking about carbon neutral industry? Okay, it's impossible. When you see that, okay, you can say, okay, I bought some offset certification and so on and so on. But we cannot talk about a carbon neutral industry, okay? Because even you are producing something, you are emitting CO2 in the atmosphere. Okay? So what we have to understand here, it's a heavy industry, okay? And if we can see the next slide, what are the environmental impacts of the pulp and paper production? Okay, the main impact is energy use. Okay, because we need, for example, if you imagine you have a tree, okay, it's a tree with I don't know, 30-40 centimeters of diameter. Okay, and you have to dissolve this tree in water. Okay, so you imagine the energy need to wrap, not to wrap, to dissolve this wood. So you need. Sorry, I don't remember the name in English, but you have to need to defiber the wood in water. So you need energy. And there is a second step when you make paper. In the beginning of the machine, you have around 94% of water. Okay. At the end of the paper machine, you have around 5% of water. So you need a lot of thermal energy to leave this water. Okay. So to make paper, we need energy. There is another point: we need water. Okay, because as I told you, to start the paper process, you have more than 95% of water, and so you need water, and you have air and water emissions. Okay, this is a problem. What are the challenges? Today is energy cost. Okay, we know that our future, okay, with our futures with climate change, the cost of energy will increase. Okay, it's quasi sure. There's no discussion on that. So we have energy costs and availability. Okay, and because, for example, when you make paper, you have a very big advantage because you have access to biomass. Okay, because it's the rest of wood, for example, or black liquor. Well, black liquor is a waste from the paper production, and you can use these black liquors to make energy. Okay, this is the point. But there is a question for the future: should biomass be used for pulp and paper production? Because this is biomass, but maybe we could make another thing than paper with this biomass. This is a question. Okay, and this is still a question. For example, in Europe, we have more and more paper mills who invest in paper manufacturers. We invest in biorefinery. Okay, for example, and the question is, do these manufacturers will produce in a near future biofuel and paper, or only biofuel? It's a question. Today it's both, biofuel and paper, but in the future, I don't know. And there is, I think, a challenge. We don't talk a lot about it in Europe. It's about water availability. Okay, even if a net consumption for paper industry is limited, because it's usually a closed loop. Okay, you can use you can recycle the water you used in your process, but you still need it. Okay, it's like you know, in France we have a lot of nuclear power. Okay, it's very good for the CO2 emissions. There's no discussion about that. But we need to refresh the nuclear central. Okay, so even if we don't have a net consumption, we need water. So we know with the climate change, we will have a very big difference between the weather. Okay, we will have sometimes with a lot of water and sometimes with a lack of water. So this is a real question. Today, I think there's no problem, but what about the future? And there is another problem, but I didn't read anything on that. It's about flood risks, because you know, all the paper mill are near rivers. Okay, and as I told you, in the future we will have more and more flood, and so what is the exposition of the paper mill to the flood risk? This is a question. I can see there is a lot of questions. Maybe we will answer after. Okay. Yeah. So what are the solutions? Honestly, the solution is the commitment and continuous improvement of the suppliers, okay, of the paper and pulp manufacturers. We have to maintain the pressure. Okay, there is a pressure from the national and European, or I don't know or international regulation, okay? And there is a pressure from the market, okay? Because I know we have more and more, for example, publisher, book or magazine publisher, who ask for more and more information to their suppliers in order to prove they ask. For example, in Europe, we have a regulation named CSRD, is in order to prove that all your suppliers are involved in the environmental protection and so on. And if we can see the next slide, please, Antonia. This is an extraction, some graphs from CEPI. CEPI is a confederation, the European Confederation of Paper Suppliers, and you can see the decrease of different indicators. For example, for electricity consumption, for AOX emission from since 1991. So there is honestly. There is an actual actual involvement of the pulp and paper manufacturers on the environmental issues for a long time. Okay, next. And this is what you can obtain from your paper manufacturers. It's named paper profiles, and in this kind of documents, you can see all the different environmental impact of the pulp and paper production on the environment. And on the next slide, you can see the carbon profiles. This is a methodology from CEPI, the Confederation of European Confederation of Paper Manufacturers, and with this document, you can have information on the carbon footprint of the paper you use. And it's very, very, very interesting. And just one point, when you are talking about the carbon footprint of a paper, it's important to understand that this carbon footprint depends on the paper mill, okay? The carbon footprint doesn't depend on the paper quality. Okay, for example, you cannot say, okay, a coated paper has a carbon footprint higher than a non-coated paper, or you cannot say, okay, recycled paper has a carbon footprint less than virgin fibers paper. No, the carbon footprint of a paper depends on the energy choices of the paper mill. Okay, if you use, for example, coal on your paper mill, we still have very, very few paper mills using coal in Europe. But if you're using coal, if you use coal to make energy, the carbon footprint of your paper will be very, very high. Okay, if you use only biomass or renewable energy, for example, from wind power. Okay, the carbon footprint of your paper will be very, very low. Okay, and for example, for papers, I know in Europe the carbon footprint, the lowest carbon footprint I saw in Europe, it's around 80 kilograms of CO2 per tons of paper product. Okay, and the highest is around 2,000 kilograms per ton of paper product. Okay, so this is important to know that remember the carbon footprint of the paper depend on the energy choices of the paper mill. It doesn't depend on the quality of the paper. Okay, so next, please. And so we saw the forest management, pulp and paper production. Now let's talk about transport. Okay, transport. It's a big deal. We can use you can use vessels. We can use train. We can use truck. Okay, if we see on the next slide. Sorry. This is a map and I work for Spanish printers. And honestly, I like map because when you see something on the map, it's obvious. Okay, for example, this is a map from printers based in Barcelona, in the east of Spain, and all the black points are the paper mill. You can see the paper mills that supplied these printers. Okay, and so we miss only one other paper mill in China. Okay, so when we are talking about transport of paper, donc from the paper mill to the printers, okay, it's international transport, okay. And you can see, okay, for example, for people who don't know very well Europe, from the point Portugal, so in the southwest of Europe, to the Finland, we're talking about 4,000 kilometers, okay. 4,000 kilometers. And honestly, I know that sometimes when these Spanish printers buy, sometimes, not always, buy paper from Finland, paper can come by truck. Okay, it's crazy. It's crazy. So we have to optimize this point. It's very, very important. I don't tell you, no, please, if you are on European printers, buy only European paper. But I just tell you, okay, if you are European printers and you buy, you are in the south of Europe and you buy paper from the northern Europe, please have a look on it. Okay. And so what can we do on that? Please, next. Sorry. So what are the environmental impacts of transport? We're talking about carbon emissions. Okay, obviously, when you are consuming when you are consuming fuels or diesel or so on, you are emitting CO2 in the atmosphere, and air pollution. Okay, this is a very big point. Air pollution. Challenges. What are the challenges? Today, one of the main challenge is the volatile international markets. Okay, because we are more and more paper mills who are closing. Okay, that are closing, and so you can find a good solution. For example, you have a good solution with your paper suppliers. You can define. Okay, we will take the train from the paper mill to the printers, and so on and so on. You can have you can find common solution. Okay, but for example, what happens if the paper mill is closing? Okay, and so it's very important, for example, for book publishers to find different sources of paper. Okay, because you know, if you have a problem on one paper mill, it's very important to find another solution with another paper mill. Okay, and I think there is a problem. Sorry, it's a European point of view. It's the transport cost seems underestimated. Okay, it's clear that environmental impacts of transport are not internalized in the total cost. Okay, so I think today when you transport paper from the paper mill to the printers, you don't pay for the actual cost. Okay, and in Europe, this cost could increase a lot. And so what will be the impact? It's a problem. What could be the solution? Slow down. Okay, this is so there is there is when if you want after this webinar, okay, just if you want to say, okay, what can I do to decrease my environmental impact? The first point is slow down. Slow down. Okay, and each time you work with emergency, you will have more impact on the environment. Okay, it's obvious because, for example, for a publisher, if you work in emergency, you tell to your printers, please print this book. I need it next week. Okay, for example, the printers maybe he won't have the good format of the paper. Okay, so we will use another paper, bigger, And so the paper waste will increase, okay? But if you lay time to your printer to say, okay, please, can you print me this book for the next month, for example? And you know, in order to optimize the paper waste, can you buy directly to the paper mill paper with a good format? Okay, so you let time to your printers to buy the specific format to the paper manufacturers. Okay, you will decrease the paper waste. Okay, so there is only one thing to remind after this webinar: slow down. It's very important, and be creative. This is honestly, these solutions are written on this part of transport, but you can write it on every step of the book production chain. Okay, it's slow down and be creative. And there is one point, it's very important. In the beginning of this webinar, I told you, okay, I'm working on this topic for 25 years. Okay, it can be an advantage because honestly, I begin to understand some points. Okay, honestly, fully for me, but I just I begin. But the other point, if I can have the weight of my experiences, and for example, we have more and more young people who are coming in on the market, and saying, oh, why we don't test this solution? And the problem of my experience, I can tell them, oh, no, sorry, we tested already 10 years ago, and it was without any success. So we tested, so don't retest it. And it's a mistake. Okay, we have to understand that the world today is not the same world as 10 years ago. Okay, and there is some solution we tested 10 years ago without any success, but maybe today we can retest it in order to see if it's possible today or not. Okay, and so this is very important to slow down, be creative, use your experience, but don't use it always. Okay, it's important to say, okay, keep your an open mind with with young people, or to test something and it's sorry, it's a French aspect. We know in France it's a big mistake to make an error. Okay, if you make in France, if you make an error, all the management can tell you, no, it's a mistake. You don't have to make these errors. And for with this environment topics, it's very important to accept to make error because we don't know exactly where we are going to. Okay, so we have to test, and we could find some solution. We couldn't find some or not. Okay, but it's the error, I think, is to stop to imagine anything and to stop testing anything. Okay, this is a point. This is my point. Okay, next, printing. Okay, this is my specialty. Printing. Let's talk about printing. Okay, printing is big industry too. Okay, even we can find little workshop where 2 or 3 employees printing. Book printing is a big industry. Okay, for example, in Europe, the biggest book printers has around 15 production sites. Okay, in Spain, France, UK, Germany, and so on. It's a big industry. And what is very interesting, it's because it's a big industry. And before, you know, today at world level, the copy numbers is decreasing. Okay, the average copy numbers. Okay, for example, in France, when we used to, I don't know, to have a copy number of 5,000 copies. Now we are printing 1,000 copies. And so this big industry has to make a revolution because they must be able to print only 20, 100, 500 copies. Okay, this is a revolution, and this is a digital revolution. So this is a big industry with big impact. It's not so big as paper manufacturers, but it's big industry. But you can, when I talk about big industry, you know, in France, when you have printers with 50 employees, okay, you are big. Okay, so it's a big industry, but not so big as a paper manufacturer. Okay, next, please. Okay, what are the environmental impact? In composition, okay. Honestly, it wasn't a big deal 10 years ago, but in Europe, we are talking more and more and more about ink composition because we have vegetable-based ink, okay. We can use it mainly for sheet fed offset, okay, when you're printing a sheet with offset. You can have vegetable-based ink. You can have vegetable ink for the newspaper printing, okay, but it's very complicated for heat-set and other process. But even you have vegetable-based ink, pigments are always coming from the chemical industry. Okay, this is a point. And there is okay, when we're talking about mineral oil, it's not non-renewable materials, okay, and it's more in Germany. In France, we accept the UV ink, okay, it's a specific ink, and in Germany they say, okay, it's not a solution because UV ink are plastic. Okay, so this is I think it's a new topic, and we will talk more and more about ink composition. Energy use, okay, and to when we use printing machine, we need energy. When we are using cooling system, we use energy, and mainly for digital process, okay. When so this is the topic. And waste management, because you know, in average, the percentage of paper waste for printers, a book printer, okay, not for newspaper, but for book printers. When you buy 1 metric ton of paper, you will generate around 250 kilograms of waste of paper. Okay, so we have to work on the optimization of paper consumption. It's very, very, very important. You know, in France, my evaluation is you have only 50% of the paper consumed that is really used, for example, by readers and so on. The percentage of waste from the printer to the final readers is around 50%. When if you take into account the waste, the unsold copy, the overproduction, and so on, we lose 50%. So this is a big challenge. Paper price trends, okay, in Europe this year, okay, this okay, but we know we have more and more increase and decrease and increase and decrease, and but at least increase of paper price, and this will be our future. And competition from digital solutions, okay, this is and we will conclude on this topic this webinar, but this is a way. What are the solutions to debate? Okay, optimize paper use to reduce waste. It's I think, and as we see, when you know, the paper represents around 60% of the carbon footprint of a book. Okay, more or less, in magnitude order, 60%. Okay, so if you decrease your paper consumption by 1%, okay, you can the decrease of the your emission is 0.6%. It's huge. It's huge. Energy saving, okay, saving energy in the workshop. It's very important. Improve workshop organization, and this is a point. Use a full cost approach. Okay, this is very important when you want to evaluate the cost of a book. Don't see only the cost of the production, but you have to see the cost of the storage, of the transport, all, and you have to have a global approach. Okay, next please. This is some photographies from workshop in order to show you what the printers, how the printers organize their workshop, and it's more and more and more and more clean. Okay, it's very, very important. Okay, distribution, please, next. About distribution, what is very important is environmental impact, cumulative impacts of the whole chain. Okay, if you, for example, if you lose a book at this level, you have all the environmental impacts of the book on it, and end of life. Okay, this is a real discussion in France when talking about the end of life of a book. Okay, can we recycle? Yes, we can recycle it, yeah. But what can we do after that with fibers? It's a point. Overproduction, okay. Overproduction in France, it's every time you know we are in autumn. At this period of the year is a period where when you have a book price. Okay, I don't know if you know Goncourt. There is a lot of price, okay, for book, and so we have a lot of new novels in the bookshop, and we are talking about overproduction. How can you read all these books and unsold copies, right? And overproduction and unsold copies are connected. Distribution organization, okay, how organize the transport to the bookshop. It's a topic. Solutions, I don't have the solution. Honestly, it's only some ways. Okay, sales monitoring. This is very, very important to know where are your book in which bookshop, because if you miss some copies in one bookshop, can you transfer these copies in the other bookshop? Or I think it's better than to print more and more and after increase your unsold copies. Print on demand. It's not the solution, but it can be a solution, okay? And be creative, okay? You're used to this point. Next, please, because I see. So let's talk about carbon footprint of a book. This is an example from a big book publisher in France, and you can see, as I tell you, from a book with a manufacturing level breakdown, you can see paper pollution, it's around 50% of the carbon footprint of a book. Paper transportation, it's European point of view, around 15%. Printing, 15. Transport from printing sites to distribution site, 8. Offset plates, it can be, because for offset plates, we are using virgin aluminum with a very, very high carbon footprint, so we can see it. Donc, and ink, varnish, lamination is not a big deal. Okay, next, please. Value chain breakdown. Okay, this is for a big publisher in France. So the production, okay, the production of all the book represents around 60% of the total emission of a book publisher. Publishing, so all the work with the editors and so on, so around 5%. You have bookshop, 5%, distribution, logistic, 10, storage. Storage is quite important because, you know, we have big building to store the book, and before they come, when they are delivered to the bookshop, and when they come back, we need a very big building. So it's why storage is quite important. And don't forget, so it's in France. Sorry, I don't know the situation at the worldwide level, but customers travel, because if you take your car only to buy book, only to kiss your bookseller, okay, your car are emitting CO2 emission. So this is the one. So you can see after this meeting this graph, and please, if you have some question, I will be happy to answer it. So next, to conclude, just one point. It's about the carbon footprint, the average carbon footprint of a book. Average, be aware that the carbon footprint depends on the weight of the book, because it depends on the paper consumption. It's around, if I tell you, okay, it's around 8 100 grams of CO2 equivalent. Okay, what is the equivalent? Okay, for example, it's around 0.6 liters of wine, red wine. Okay, or 12 hours of video streaming. Okay, so it's important to compare the impact of a book on other materials or other and you can see it's around one liter of coffee. Okay, so if you when you read your book, if you drink more than 1 liter of coffee, okay, it's 50-50. 50 emissions are coming from your book production and 50 from the coffee. Okay, just to conclude about digital. Next, please. Okay, what is the best, printed book or digital book? Okay, this is coming from this graph is coming from our French environmental protection agency named ADEL. Okay, and this study from 2 years ago, published two years ago. And the question is, okay, what is we want to compare printed book and e-reader, tablet, and dedicated tablet. Okay, and what is the unit value? It's okay, one novel of 300 pages, and one novel 300 pages, you need more or less 6.2 hours to read all the book. And what is important? We can see that, for example, the e-reader, if you want to compare the paper printed book and the reader, you have to define how many books you read on this e-reader. Okay, and so if we can see on the left, and we have different use of a book, and it's very important for library. Okay, we can see if you read the book with single use, 2 uses, and 5 uses. Okay, and for example, if we compare e-reader with a book, just book with single use, okay, if you read more than 10 books a year on the e-reader, it's better to read on e-tablet. Okay, and here we are only talking about CO2 emission. Okay, because we will see there is other environmental impact. Okay, but sorry, if this book is read by 2%, okay, the difference, okay, between e-reader and printed book is 20 books a year. Okay, and if we're talking about 5 uses, we're talking about 50 books read on this e-tablet e-reader a year. Okay, it's important to see that. And the same if you have a dedicated tablet. Okay, it's better to read on. It's always better to read printed book. Okay, and so when we are talking about a library, you can see, you can imagine it could be better to recommend to your clients. I don't know how you tell them, how you name that, but your clients to read on paper than on e-reader if they have their own e-reader. And just to compare with other environmental aspects, next, please. This is all different environmental impact. Okay, we are talking about climate change, acidification, fine particle matters, and here in on the left you have printed book 2 uses, and you can see for all the impact. Okay, if we use the same unit, functional unit for all the impact. Okay, it's better to read on printed book. And just one point, this study is not coming from a book publisher. This study is coming from the French Environmental Protection Agency. Okay, so this is a very interesting point. So thank you, and please, if you have any question, it would be a pleasure for me to answer.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was a really fascinating presentation, and I'm particularly interested in those last couple of slides that shows the impact of a book relative to other formats, and how many times you need to use a book to reduce its environmental impact. And obviously libraries have a very large role to play in that. So it's very enlightening. Thank you so much. We have a lot of questions to get through. I'm not sure that we'll be able to address all of them, but we'll start. The first question is from Nathan Grice, who says, "Hi, Benoît. Given the voluntary nature of FFC and PEFC certification in most countries, do you think governments should play a stronger role in enforcing sustainable sourcing for printed materials, particularly when dominant platforms like Amazon KDP chose not to pursue certification despite their scale and influence?"
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the goal of the LDUE regulation. Okay, the problem is, you know, before Europe wanted to be an example in environmental protection and so on, and now so it's over. Okay, so the new regulation should be put in place in the 1st of January, okay, in the beginning of 26. And we had an information just yesterday to tell us, okay, this regulation is postponed. So this is a real problem. Yes, I think the government should be more involved in this point. Yeah.
Yeah, we have also quite a lot of questions which are related to the digital libraries or some of the routine practice. For example, this question asking about some measurement of the footprint for a library. Given the shift to digital libraries, we still have sustainability concerns on digital carbon footprint, especially how to monitor, calculate. Awareness as well as training is key in matters library sustainabilities. Yes, I think, do you have any, Ben, do you have any idea for the library to measure or to calculate the carbon footprint?
We have I work with a consultant in France who is a specialist. She's named Fanny Valenbois. This is one of his specialties, and we have more and more. I'm sorry, it's not my specialty. I'm not. I don't have very good information to give you, but we have more and more. It's in French. But I can send you some documents on this topic in French, and you can translate it automatically. And yeah, because there is something to do. And when we're about digital, this is the same. When we're talking about the digital industry and so on, digital communication, we have specialists in France. We have some companies who are specialists in the evaluation of the environmental impact of digital communication. Okay, and for example, I made a tool for the French magazine publisher, and they asked me, okay, can you assess the carbon footprint of the printed magazine? And I had a collaboration with another company, consultant company, to assess the carbon footprint of the digital communication. And this is a very big point here. But about library, I will send you after this webinar some documents I can find.
Yes, thank you so much. Actually, in the original question, it's asking us to arrange, asking ENSULIB to arrange more training and some webinar on this topic. So
Okay.
let's see how we could do in the future. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a question, and I'm not sure, Ben, if you're able to answer this. There's a question from Jacobson, Mara, who is asking about book restoration and the impacts of book restoration relative to, I guess, printing new books, and that they've heard that the impact of book restoration to the environment can be quite harmful.
Yeah, I think this is a point. Today, from cost point of view, there is some book. Okay, it's cheapest to to recycle the book compared to storing it for a long time. But there is a new company, the same in France. Its specialty is to make to renove the book, okay, in order to give them back to the market. And this is a kind of good solution. I'm pretty sure. And there is another big question in France. It's about the second-hand market of the book. Okay, and so but in France we have and in some other European country, you know that we have unique price for a book. Okay, you can it's forbidden. Okay, the book publishers define the price of the book. Okay, and you cannot sell it at a lower price. So this is a problem. If you want to, for example, if you want to say, okay, this book there is a problem on the cover, and I want to apply a discount. Okay, it's forbidden. Okay, except after some, I'm not specialist in, but after some months, you can decrease the price of the book. But there is time it's impossible. So the restoration of a book could be a good point. Yeah, I think so.
Do you think we still have time to have one more question?
I think we can maybe have one or two more questions if that's okay. We still have 45 people watching, so.
Yeah, I saw interesting questions. I think it's also very good questions from Mary Landeville. It's about the books, the print on demand. And often when my library orders print books, our vendor replies that the title is print on demand. Often we already have someone waiting to borrow the book, so they have to place an urgent order for the book. And then sometimes they will receive some reply that they can help to do it print on demand. But I think it's a question about the transportation. If there's the books that is print on demand, so is it any way to guarantee that the books was delivered from a closest path, or from a shortest path to the library? She also have an example that she's based in Norway, sometimes receive books printed in, for example, in the USA. So we'd love to see the actual printing make as close as possible to the customer. Is there any way that in the industry you have done something in this to guarantee that is the shortest way for the transportation?
No, honestly, we don't. But I think there is a point. You know, I think it's important to understand that we cannot solve all the problem in one way. Okay, and so we have to select some points, and we say, okay, I want to work on it. From my own situation, it's about the transportation by plane. Okay, so if you tell me, okay, there is a book on demand print in USA and sent to Norway by plane, okay, it's crazy. Okay, you have to change. It's absolutely crazy from economic, from environmental point of view. It's crazy, and this I think there could be a point, and we do it from in other situation. But I'm pretty sure that you can find printers in Norway who can print for you this book. Okay, it's very easy for the publisher to send the files, the digital files, to these printers and ask the printers to print it. And this is a kind of new solution we have to test. Okay, I don't tell you, okay, it's what you have to do, but I tell you it's what you have to test. Okay, and the point to say, okay, never transport book by plane. I think it's a good thing to say, okay, I don't want to. And for example, I work for insurances, and you know, in France, it's a colonial story. We still have different area in the Pacific, in the Caribbean. Okay, so it's still French, and we are working a lot with this area. And for example, we used to print all the documents in near Paris, okay, and to send it by planes in the other way, okay, in Martinique, Guadeloupe, La Réunion, and so on, Tahiti, and so on. And I tell to my client, it's crazy. It's crazy. You have to keep the plane away. And so we found printers in different area, and now we send files, digital files, directly to the local printers, and the local printers are printing what was the document needed on this area. And so I think to have this this principle, okay, never put a book or a printed matter in a plane, okay, to transport, in order to transport it, okay. I think it's a good principle.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think we could only we have no time. So sorry about that. Maybe in the future we'll have a next webinar, or we may share some more information on the website of ENSULIB. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day, evening,
today.
afternoon, what you want.
Thank you so much, Ben, for a really fascinating presentation. And thanks to all of our audience members for their very engaging questions and for your attention as well. We will be posting a copy of the recording to our YouTube website in the next couple of days, and the slide deck as well. So we'll send, the link will become available through the ENSULIB webinar page very shortly. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and have a wonderful day. Thanks, Ben.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.